Welcome back, everybody, to Real Estate Junkies Coast to Coast. I am your co-host, Rusty Ham, on the West Coast, SoCal by San Diego.
And
Rick
I'm
Abbiati on the East Coast.
Yep, and it's cold.
You say that every time. You say that it's cold every time. Yeah, it's nice out. It's today is January 5th, and it's probably maybe high 60s out here. Me and my wife are going to go on a nice little hike later after this. So it's going to be really cool. Rick, this episode is going to be a little different, right? We spoke off the air. Instead of doing a warm up, a game plan, and a cool down, what we're experiencing in our community is we have 8 traits of a successful wicked smart investor, right? And we're going to go through each one of those. And so the most successful associates in the wicked smart community, they do all of these, right? We talked about it yesterday, I think, right, Rick? It's not a buffet.
No, definitely not.
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
There's a proven system in place, and we talk about mindset, skill set systems. Well, this kind of encapsulates all of it, and you can't just leave part of it on the table. Just like anybody, whether it's in real estate or any successful business person, will tell you the same thing. If you look at these multimillionaires, they'll almost word for word echo all of these 8 traits.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you said that in the mindset, skill set, and systems, because when we talk about it's like the Venn diagram, right? They all intertwine, and then right in the middle is a successful, whatever success you're looking for as far as business owner. For us, it's a successful, wicked, smart investor, right? So if you don't have one of them, if you don't have the correct mindset, then your success in business is doomed to fail, I would imagine. We talk about mindset, I talked about yesterday, right? Which is, some people have a victim mindset and they blame everybody and it's everybody else's fault. And you're not going to have a successful business if you're just blaming other people. You don't take responsibility for yourself. There's a pessimist, right? That everything's going to fail. Everything, nothing's going to work. And they don't, especially in our community, they want proof of concept, right? And you have the pessimists in our community and they think, well, this is not working, so I'm going to give up, right? And then you have the optimist, which everything's going to work out. And if I just keep making $10 a day, eventually things are going to work out. Well, yes and no, right? If things aren't working out, you have to look within and find out what's going on, right? You can't just be optimistic all the time, right?
Right. And it's all about manifestation. I mean, if your belief is there and your mindset is right, everything manifests itself.
Yeah. Then you have the realist, right? Somebody, a realist, if you think about it, people that are alcoholics, they go to they go to AA. What's the first thing they say? Hi, I'm Russell Ham and I'm an alcoholic. So they are accepting who they are or what's going on. They're realists. They understand what's going on. But then so that's a realist. That's okay. I'm recognizing that something's going on in my business, but you want to have it's called a warrior mindset, Rick. And the warrior mindset is, when things go bad, how do you see that as an opportunity to grow, right? And we talk about it, or is when you first start out in our community, we want you to get on the phones and fail, because that's how you grow, right? And we're going to talk about that in our 8 traits, is get on the phone, throw up all over yourself, and then have us come in and help you so that you can grow.
Exactly. Yep.
So let's get into the 8 traits. Rick, what is the first? So we did this a while back, but again, it's not a buffet. We can't just pick and choose out of these. You gotta have all 8 in order to be successful. So what's number 1, Rick?
So it's showing up at everything. Anywhere you can possibly gain information is so critical. It's like when you're going to college, you show up for class. Here, you're showing up for coaching. With the Wicked Smart community, of course, we have our weekly coaching calls. We have our Wicked Smart sit down, which is open to everybody. We have our mastermind that is open to just associates and apprentices. And we have office hours, which is, specific questions. But with the community, you have people that have questions, and they're common questions. People that one person has run into it. Well, it's usually not one person that's run into something. So it's getting around that community and absorbing information.
Yeah, and office hours, you and I do it, right? And it might be something that, let's say, on their weekly call with us, we weren't able to get to their questions, so they come to office hours, and this is for the whole community. They just come in. You can be a fly on the wall. You can just sit there and listen, or you can ask questions, and we'll get after it for you. Yeah, good stuff. And then I think part of it too is leveraging the community and absorbing that information as much as possible, right? So, I don't remember, I know I've been in the community for 6 years. I think you've been four and a half, right?
Going on 4.
I tell people, I think there's been a handful of times that I missed a mastermind, right?
And I've never missed one.
Yeah. And we both, and listen, it's for me, I'm West Coast. It's at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I had a W-2. And what did I do? Right? I was a teacher. So how am I supposed to make this mastermind call if I'm in the middle of class? Right. So I made ways. I would have it on my phone. And let's say hypothetically, I would just say, hey, free play soccer. And they would go play soccer on the field. And then I would be on the mastermind, right? With my sombrero hat so I wouldn't get sunburned, right? But I made it work. And I was like, I did that from 2019 to for 3 years. I was going to the masterminds, while I was in class, right? So I made it work, and we're going to talk about that. I think it's in I think it's number 8, where talk about sacrifices. But Rick, you had a full-time job,
Right. And, with me, and at one point I was managing 180 people roughly. And, I would say, okay, well, I'm going to do this business at lunchtime. Well, 9 times out of 10 at lunchtime was a working lunch. So I didn't get to do that, but I scheduled alternative times that I could use as a fallback.
yeah. And so again, it's just showing up, right? We're talking about showing up, right? You just show up. Maybe you get a nugget or two. Maybe, like you said, maybe there's a question that somebody else had that is like that triggered something that you had. You're like, oh, I had that same question. I was just afraid to ask it, right, on the mastermind or on the weekly call.
Right.
So
That one nugget may be the nugget that's going to launch and catapult your business. You just never know.
yeah, yeah, I remember a couple times, because we do REI Black Book and we do systems, and there was one where you were talking about REI Black Book on one of the masterminds, and I was like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, and so I started doing it, and now it made my business a lot better because of that one little tweak that you taught me, just on a mastermind, right? All right, let's switch over to number 2. Rick, what's number 2?
Coaching calls, show up, be present, don't, sometimes we'll be on these coaching calls and we look and people have their cameras on, which we expect because that's part of being present. And it creates more energy, quite honestly, if you're on the call. It's different talking and you see a name on there and that's all you see. You don't see their face. So it's more one-to-one interaction. But when you look on there and, oh, they're in the background making dinner, or things that are taking their mind away and not being directly focused on what's going on the coaching call.
Yeah, and coaching's not free, to be transparent with everybody. And it's not just us. There's other coaching programs out there you got to pay, and it baffles me that people pay money, a lot of money sometimes, and they show up to these weekly calls with, like you said, the camera is off, or they're on their cell phone walking around, and the camera's bouncing up and down. And I'm like, how can you spend that much money and then not be present? Like, I would sit down in front of a computer. Not only just a laptop, my PC, and I'd have my notepad out, and I'm like, I want to take notes because I'm like, I spent this much money. I want to get the most out of it, and it just baffles me that people don't do that. So come prepared, right? And so talk about coming prepared. What should they do to come prepared?
Exactly. And I know early on that's what I was coached to do is throughout the week, If you're making calls or whatever, you'll have a challenge with somebody on the phone, or you're having some mindset problems and getting through things, feeling confident. Write that stuff down, bring it to the coaching calls. We're not professors where we're giving lectures. If you're not coming prepared, there's really nothing for us to coach you on. So that's the key, is to be prepared with questions to talk about, especially when you have, whether it's just one-on-one coaching calls or in a group session. It helps everybody.
Yeah, I remember some of my coaching calls. Again, I was a teacher, and some of my coaching calls were during class. So what I did was I had asked the other PE teachers, "Hey, can you watch my class?" And so then I would go into this private room and open my laptop, and I would have. So I mean, I there was no way I was going to have a coaching call where I'm sitting there on my phone, where basketballs are flying behind my back, and I'm sitting there on a coaching. You got to sit down and be prepared. Come with questions, because you got. I mean, again, buying homes on terms is not easy. Or calling complete strangers trying to buy their home on terms, it's not easy. You got to have questions. I'm sure you have questions, and then especially if you're starting out, you should be at least three. Hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? All right, let's get on to three. I just want to preface, not every state is a one-party state. There's a two-party states, so you got to ask permission to get your calls recorded. But talk about number three.
So number 3 with us is call critiques. This is where much of the growth comes. When you record a call, and of course we don't record it for any other purpose but to have it critiqued by us, Chris included. I submitted my calls to Chris Prefontaine for critique, and the other coaches before I got to the level where I was getting Chris's critiques. And it was invaluable. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Russ?
Yeah, we call Chris, if you don't know. And again, if you don't want to get coaching, but you want to know what we're talking about, is Quantum Leap System. It's a home study course. And in the home study course, Chris Prefontaine and all the other coaches, we created some modules. And in the module, Chris talks about ACA, right? ACA. The first A is action. You take action, which is you just make that initial dial, right? C is get that call critique, meaning you record the call, you send it to your coach, and your coach is going to critique it. We have a certain script that we go by. You don't have the exact script, but you want to touch on the points that are within that script, right? And we're going to critique you based on what you should be saying and what you shouldn't be saying, which is a lot of people, you shouldn't be saying a lot of things that you should be. Just get to the point, right? And then the other A, so it's ACA, is make those adjustments. So you're going to make those adjustments based on the critique we gave you, and then you're going to take action again, which is that last A. So you're going to make another call and use the critiques that we gave you and make those adjustments on that last call. And that is, like you said, that's the fastest way to get better. A lot of people, they'll send us their best call, which is not the best way again, we want you to fail. So send us your worst call and then we can critique you, right?
And the thing is, it's not just following scripts. When dependent on your conversation with the seller, your script may vary a little bit. But, I know I've critiqued some calls and it sounds like they're reading from a list of questions. It sounds very scripted. It doesn't go over well when you're talking to somebody. It's not natural. So I've advised them and critiqued the calls and said, talk to them like you're talking to a neighbor, a relative, or a good friend. It comes across much more natural, more conversational, and it goes over much better.
Yeah, we talk about it too. The seller doesn't know your script, right? So you can say the worst thing, or you can not go on the script. They don't know, right? So just be confident, right? We talk about just being confident. You can ask the worst question in the world, but as long as you ask it with confidence, they don't know, right? Yeah, so good stuff. Yeah, call critique is super important. Go ahead.
And the other thing is if you're really messing up your script, it's not a big deal because you can come back and correct it afterwards. Like if you call a seller back 2 or 3 months later, they're not even probably going to remember the conversation you had.
Yeah,
So,
we always talk about that. Yeah, we always talk about they have amnesia, right? They're not going to remember who you are or the conversation you had. So, yeah, good stuff. What's number four?
so that's leveraging your coach for three-way calls. And a lot of times what we'll do is we have our schedule that we not only schedule coaching calls or one-on-one coaching, but we're also there to run with you in the trenches. So we will get on the phone with your sellers and you, or we'll record the call. If you're not available, we'll talk to the sellers and record the calls so you can hear what we talked about.
Yeah, so again, we talk about our QoS system. You can do it on your own, right? There's a link in the show notes where you can click on and get QoS and try to do this on your own. And some people have, right? They've done it, but we want to make sure that you're doing the deals correctly. Like one of our core values um, is we complete all transactions with the highest integrity, right? So we want to make sure integrity wise that you are doing the right things on the seller side and you're doing things on the buyer side, right? If you try to do this on your own, you might make mistakes and it could cost you legally, it could cost you money in that, because we've run into associates that leave money on the table, meaning they don't do certain things and they leave money on the table, right? So leveraging your coach is super important, right? Getting them involved so that that the seller understands what they're getting into, right? And if you're new and you're trying to do this on your own, then there could be mistakes happen. So we want to make sure that things are done correctly and with integrity, right? So leveraging us, getting this on the phone while you're at the appointment, or getting a three-way call because maybe the seller has more questions and we can answer them in a timely manner and correctly, right? And so then once they feel comfortable, and now also leveraging your coach creates credibility, right? Because
Exactly.
often sellers are gonna be like, "Who are you? What where are you from? What company are you from?" And you're like, "Hey, we do this all across the country. I have a coach that, or we call them partners or associates. I have a partner that helps me out, and it creates that credibility, right? Because we want to create that authority in your area, correct?"
Right. And then the other thing it does, it shows there's a team behind you, which really helps with the seller.
Yeah, super important. All right, let's transition to five. Again, all these, again, we always say, this one's important. This one's important. They're. That's why I said it's not a buffet. Like they're all important. So number five, go ahead. Number five is super important as well.
Number five, and it doesn't just apply to us, it applies to any business, especially the most successful entrepreneurs have coaching, no matter what level you're at. But with us, nightly accountability, for example, with the coaches, any of the coaches, you do nightly accountability with them. So you leave your activity, we do it with a voice text. And then, the next morning or whatever following that, we'll go ahead and reply. And you let them know your activity for the day, any challenges that you're having, and anything that's going on, what you're planning on doing the next day. And it allows you to ask those questions in the one-on-one interaction. Granted, it's through voice text, but you do. And a lot of times, what'll happen, like for instance, you and I both still do nightly accountability with Chris, and a lot of times Chris will say, "Let's jump on a live call today and discuss this in more detail, like a specific deal." So, and the other thing it does, it allows us to pick up on your mental state because we can tell, and I know you've seen this, Rusty. We can tell if somebody's down and just not doesn't seem as motivated or they've had a rough day, and we can help you with that.
Yeah, yeah, we hear it in your voice, right? And we talk about language too. Sometimes when I get an associate, they do now accountability, and they say, "Oh, I only made," and you can just tell in their voice, right? The inflection in their voice goes down. Oh, I only made 5 calls today, and I only talked to one person. It's like, well, change your mindset around and say, "Hey, listen, I made five. I didn't have time today, but I made five, and I talked to one." Right? Did you hear the inflection in my voice just now? Right? When I
Yeah,
said only, my voice was a little bit lower and I was kind of sad about it. But when I said, "Hey, I made five, I was able to make five," my voice went up a little bit, right? So we hear that and we will call you on it, right? We talk about effort for effort on these, right? If the associates are leaving that accountability and they're getting us involved, we're going to pour gas on you. And it's super important that you do that, right? Also, it kind of, you don't want to not do something and then call your coach and say, hey, I didn't do anything today. And your coach goes, well, why not? Right.
Yep.
You
And
know,
one
so
thing I
it's kind of, mentally you're like, well, I got to do something today because I got to bring my coach something.
Yeah, I kind of look back. I got kind of a spanking from Chris. And I tell this story all the time. When I left my W 2 and I was full time doing real estate, I said, Chris, I made 28 calls today. And I went on through, and then Chris, of course, he's up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, out of breath on his exercise bike. And the first thing he said is, Rick, huge red flag here. You're full time. Why did you only do 28 calls? I only did that once, but that's part of
Right.
mental accountability. He was blunt to the point, but it's what I needed to hear.
Yeah. And then also, too, Chris will send us, because he gets nightly accountability with other associates. And then he'll send us, the coaches, somebody else's recording to him, and then we'll get involved, right? I remember, Jessica Johnson, who we've had on here before, and her episode came out last week. He sent us a recording of her nightly accountability, and you can tell in her inflection, and she was frustrated, and she was, almost not, almost giving up. And so Chris put that into the coaches channel, and you reached out. I know other coaches reached out to her to kind of say, and I think you reached out to her to get her back onto her why. Again, we talked about our why and how important your why is. So that's that. It's not just one coach, right? We all get involved if we feel like, number one, effort for effort. If this is a person who is very active in the community, right? She comes to every call. We talk about number one. She's number one, right? She just comes to every call. She comes with questions, all that kind of stuff. So we're pouring gas on her. So, and you reached out to her and kind of got her back on track. And then now she's, dominating the community with, I think she did 3 or 4 deals after that, right? All right, let's get on to number 6. What's number 6?
So number 6 is similar to number 5, but we use Slack for communication. And the thing is, it's again daily or nightly accountability as far as your KPIs or key performance indicators, your metrics, so to speak. So it's so important. It's just like any other habit. If you don't do your nightly accountability, then what says it's no different than, well, if you're not going to do that, you're probably not going to make dials either. So it's one of the habits that you get into doing. And the other thing is when you're doing it to the level of coaching that community, that smaller community. And you're less likely to say, I only did one dial today.
Yeah.
It's just, you need that little bit of a push, and that gives it to you.
Yeah, and it's that effort for effort, right? If we see you in Slack posting daily your numbers, and we talk about it too, don't, people get embarrassed when they don't make any dials, right? And we say, hey, if you don't make any dials, post it, right? That's the part of the accountability. It's like, hey, I didn't make any dials, but I had a win. My win was I was able to hang out with my daughter. We went to dinner or whatever that win was. It doesn't have to be business related. It can be personal. So we always ask about your wins, your daily wins. So 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 win. I was able to go to my son's cross country meet. Hypothetically, right? The reason why you didn't make any dials is because you were gone all day at your son's cross country meet, whatever that is, right? So, but we always know the ones that aren't dialing because they don't post because they're embarrassed, right? And we don't care. We don't care if you don't make any dials, just as long as you are posting daily, which means that you're holding yourself accountable. Other people are seeing what you're doing on a daily basis, and that you're mentally involved in your business, right? Even if you didn't make a dial that day, doesn't mean you're not you're not doing great in your business. I had non-dial days, but I still posted it because there was a reason why. So it's very important that we talk about accountability. It's super important that you have accountability within the community, because if you're not being held accountable, then you strain off and having competing commitments, meaning, oh, I have this other thing that I can do that's much easier, so I'm going to go do that instead of making dials. It holds you to the fire, meaning, let me just make 5 dials real quick and then I'll go do that other thing I was going to do.
Yeah, and I
All
think
right.
as we go through these 8 traits, it's not holding anything against you because you aren't doing something. It's all about we want to help you be successful. And we've been down that road, and we're still going down that road. So it's
Yeah, super important. All right, no, so number 7.
relentless consistency and discipline. I mean, every little thing you do adds up.
Yeah, we just talked about it, right? You post a win every day. You post that win every day, 5 days a week. It's going to add up. All your wins are going to add up at some point, right? And
And I
before,
think this goes to any habit. And I'll use dialing, making calls as an example. I know when I first started, I was talking to my coach at the time, and he said, "How many dials did you do today?" And I proudly said, 8 to 10. And he's like, "Rick, do you think you could bump it up?" And he said it so casually. He said, "You think you could make 15?" Well, 15 became 20, 20 became 25, and I found it easier because I had established the habit.
yep. Yeah, super. And it's just constant. It's just daily discipline, right? We also in QoS, Chris talks about the daily power of one daily discipline, right? Where every day and it doesn't have to be about dials. It can be meditation. It could be, did you work out today? Did you walk the dogs? Whatever discipline so you're tracking that on a daily basis, and it's just relentless. You just continue to track it. And we talk about it in the community. If you're not tracking, you're losing, right? So it's just that constant discipline every single day of whatever habit you think is going to push you forward, is going to move your business forward, again, personally or business wise, right?
Right. It can be reading, your reading habit,
Yep.
journaling. It can be a lot of different things. We had Peter Taunton on the other day, and he talked about doing a to-do list and going over that every morning.
Top 3, right? Your top 3. Yep.
And your habits, you put your daily habits on there so you're really achieving those.
Yep. Very cool. Last one, 8.
That is sacrifice. And it's be comfortable being uncomfortable. Business is not easy, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah, we talked about it. We talked about actually number 1, which is we both made sacrifices while we're at work. Some people will call it double dipping, but I was at a job where I could have other teachers sub in for me so I can get things done. I always tell a story. Making dials. I would, because each week we had to come to. I was with Zach. Zach was my first coach in the 90-day jumpstart, and if we didn't come with anything, he didn't call on you, right? And we're gonna start doing that in our community now. If you don't come with your metrics, then you're gonna sit there and listen, right? Because we want the serious and dedicated. And so I was always nervous to come to our weekly calls without anything. So there was times where I would send the kids on a mile run. I would do the mile run, and then I had like TAs. I had TAs that would mark down their times. And so, mile runs for high schoolers was, it ranged from 7 minutes to 15 minutes, right? So while they were running, I had my clipboard out with some lead sheets, and I would make dials while they were running. And then when they were done running, I would send them to do free play soccer, right? So, our class was about an hour and a half long. So while they either ran or they were doing free play soccer, I had my lead sheets out and I was calling, right? So I made that sacrifice because I knew I didn't want to come to my weekly call without anything, right? So talk about some of the sacrifices you made.
So, with me, if I came home from work, and actually I was working from home for during the COVID time frame, but it would be get done at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and a lot of times it would go into the evenings that I was working. But then it was like, I'm going to sit down and have dinner, put on the news, put on, uh, Chicago or Chicago PD or,
Chicago Fire.
or Chicago Fire. Yeah. And it was like getting out of that and making that sacrifice and prioritizing this business. Because looking at where I was at and looking at down the road at retirement and not really having a positive attitude about what was going to be there for retirement, this was my alternative. And that's why that it comes down to my why. So your why has to be strong enough that'll get you through to make those sacrifices.
Yep. Yep. All right, Rick. I thank you so much. Let's just end on this. Talking about sacrifices and all these 8 trades, a couple things are happening to us because we're relentless and we have discipline. I have a deal that a couple months ago I went on an appointment. The guy wanted to sell traditionally, and we talk about there's fractured closings out all the time. So the guy tried to sell traditionally, had a buyer in hand, buyer is falling through. So I get a text yesterday, right? Hey, can we still talk? And I just like I ghosted this guy. I was like, okay, well, do whatever you need to do. And I let it sit, knowing that, a lot of these buyers aren't following through. And then all of a sudden I get a text, right? So always stay consistent and disciplined, and things will happen. Like, for example, you had a couple of things. You have an SEO that you don't even touch anymore, and you're still getting calls from that, right?
Right. I had built a website with search engine optimization and I paid a good amount of money for it, but that's a full time job keeping up with that. So it got to the point that, okay, well, if it generates business, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And years later, I'm getting calls on it. And if somebody searches in Google for Sell My House Fast, New Hampshire, my website comes up number one. And I haven't done anything with it in a while. And just, in fact, it was the 31st of December, going right into the new year. I got a call out of the blue, somebody looking to sell their property. So I'm in the process of working that deal now. So you just never know. It's put that work in and it pays off in the future.
Yeah, you stay consistent. And we talk about a lot in our association that you're not going to get a deal on the first call. You're not going to get it on the second call. You're not going to get on the third call. It might be 6 months later. It might be a year later. You gotta have that discipline, and you gotta be consistent. Because a lot of people, we've talked about, you and I have talked about it, right? It took me a year to get my first deal. It took you 15
15
months.
months. Yep. My
So
my fourth deal was the first appointment I went on 14 months later. The seller called me
yeah,
out of the blue. He said, I'm ready to pull the trigger.
yeah, people, the instant gratification, especially with social media stuff, it's, swiping, they want that instant gratification. With terms, just it's going to take a while. It's not easy, and you got to have that discipline in order to make things happen, because it is lucrative, right? A lease purchase is a $10 consideration, and you get a payday one of, it ranges from $50,000 to $100,000. That's infinite, right? That's infinite.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good stuff, Rick. I appreciate it. Happy New Year, buddy.
Happy New
And
Year.
we're gonna have some good things down the road here coming up. So take care. See everybody on the other side. See you, Rick.
Take care, everybody. Take care, Russ.
Bye.